Wizards of the Coast has introduced a brand new mechanic to Magic the Gathering based on previous Innistrad cards that features a day and night cycle. But the question is, what are daybound / nightbound cards, and how do they function?
The Magic Historian.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we've got an unexpected treat on our hands. I thought we weren't going to start Innistrad Midnight Hunt spoiler season until tomorrow. And yet here we are discussing not only spoilers, but a brand new mechanical concept that was inspired by previous Innistrad cards. And it is showcased here on a Planeswalker, which is a great way to start out talking about spoilers because people love Planeswalkers. Now, you may notice that I am somewhat shrouded in darkness, and I assure you that is because I wanted this video to feel thematically correct with the day and night cycle, and it definitely has nothing to do with the fact that I am rearranging my office and that the lights aren't set up properly. So please enjoy this deep thematic darkness that shrouds me. So we're going to be taking a look here at Arlinn the Pack's Hope. All right, now the weird part is this is a two-sided transforming planeswalker, but we only got one side spoiled. So we're going to have to wait to see what the other side is. But no matter, this is a great card to introduce us to the concept of the day-night mechanic. All right, so Arlinn the Pack's Hope is 1 green, 1 red, and 2 for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Now you'll notice right here it says daybound, and this is the concept of the day-night cycle. So daybound says if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. Now, if you're familiar with older Innistrad sets, you might already be familiar with this concept that shows up on werewolf cards, and I will show you an example of an older werewolf card from older times in Innistrad to really give you an idea of where the day-night cycle came from, but we'll get to that later. So, this card is daybound. It says, if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. So there are conditions that are met to turn the situation from day into night. And once you start the day-night cycle, it will be either day or night for the rest of the game. But until a card is played that cares about the day-night cycle, it is essentially non-existent. So you don't start with the game being in the day mode. It requires literally a card that cares about it showing up. And I have to admit, each time I say day, in my head, if you've seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, my head's like, a day man, you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so let us move on in case you don't. So, +1. Until your next turn, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. -3, create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. Now, Arlinn's an interesting planeswalker. She is a werewolf planeswalker who actually had her spark ignite while she was in a werewolf form. So she basically ended up being thrown through the blind eternities, because usually what happens is planeswalkers ignite their sparks under extreme duress, very stressful situations. So Arlinn fought against being a lycanthrope, right? Never really wanted to transform into the werewolf side, used magical charms to try and remain locked in the human form as much as possible, but unfortunately that wasn't going to be enough. She ends up going on a werewolf rampage, her spark ignites, she's transported through the blind eternities to another plane of existence where she's still rampaging, but she actually ended up maintaining her sanity. So previously, when she turned into a werewolf, she would just be a beast, right? The werewolf brain would take over and she'd go around destroying everything. But she was able to retain essentially her human mind in her werewolf form. And that shifted her perspective towards herself and other werewolves, wolves, and things like that. So for me, I'm very interested to know what the whole concept of the Pack's Hope is supposed to represent in the storyline itself, right? Because obviously this makes it seem like she is the guardian over the wolves of Innistrad. So I want to see if this is just a cool name or it actually branches out further into the story. And I like the fact that it shows her in this very peaceful state with wolves surrounding her, and most likely the sun is just rising, and she's just shown in this very calm sort of fashion, which I imagine will be quite the contrast from her werewolf side, where she will be going on a rampage. So, I mean, when you take a look at the abilities, it's not like super exciting on this side of the card. It's all right. You can cast creature spells at instant speed, and your creatures get a +1/+1 counter on them. So that's not terrible as a +1, but it doesn't feel like it has a really big immediate effect on the board. The second ability of creating 2 green wolf creature tokens is all right, but it does immediately drop her to 1 loyalty. So I will say that on the surface, this Planeswalker card isn't really blowing my socks off, but we only have half of the picture in this case, right? Because this is a transforming card that will have a day and night side. And while we're on the subject, take a look right here up at the top. You can see there is a little sun that is indicating this is the daybound side of the card. So all the daybound cards will have a day side that shows a sun, and on the other side, it will show a crescent moon, and I'll show you an example of that later on in the video. So they have created token inserts that represent this day and night cycle, kind of like an emblem that you can use just for memory purposes. So this is the day side. It says if it becomes day or night, or if a day-bound permanent enters the battlefield, track day-night for the rest of the game. So basically, if nothing had happened up until the point where you played Arlen, nobody had played any day-bound cards, you wouldn't be keeping track of this. As soon as Arlen came out, that's when you start going, okay, pay attention. Is it day or night? So the text says, as it becomes day, transform all night-bound permanents. And it also says if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. So basically, this is a universal sort of shift. Up until now, cards that felt like they were doing the werewolf transformation were all done on an individual basis, whereas this is just one blanket effect that gets all of the cards that are either daybound or nightbound at the same time. And you can see in the artwork, this is clearly depicting a town, maybe a city in Innistrad. It feels townish to me. You can see that you've got the very Innistrad style buildings. The sun is rising up above the mountaintops, and all of the residents of Innistrad can breathe a sigh of relief, because in the daytime, you don't have to worry about the vampires marauding around, and you don't have to worry about the werewolves coming to eat you as well. So obviously, if we have a day token, then we have a night token as well, and this is the night token. So the night token says, as it becomes night, transform all daybound permanents. Permanents enter the battlefield nightbound. If a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day next turn. So going back to the day one for a second, you'll notice that when you put cards out with the day, it doesn't transform them into daybound, and that's most likely because daybound will be the front-facing aspect on every single one of these cards across the board. But when you take a look at the nightbound one, it totally makes it so that any daybound cards, if it's nighttime, automatically come in on the night side. So if you were to play Arlen Cord when it was already night, instead of playing her face up, you would flip the card over and play with the transformed side upwards, all right? And the other big difference between night and day is day says if a player casts no spells during their turn, then next turn it's night. And the night side says if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day next turn. So casting 1 spell is the only situation where you really don't have a day-night transformation. If you cast 1 spell, then you haven't casted no spells, so you don't trigger the day situation, and you haven't cast 2 spells, so it doesn't trigger night going away, right? So it might feel the tiniest bit confusing on the surface of it, but really it's just a codified version of the old Innistrad werewolf concept. And I'll show you that right now with the Mayor of Avabruck. Okay, so notice right away up, wrong side, up here at the top, you've got the sun symbol that represents that this is the daybound side of the card. Now, I'm not certain if they're going to go back and errata all the old Innistrad werewolves to use the daybound, nightbound mechanic, because they are essentially identical. Not, I guess, 100%, because With these sort of cards, these werewolves, actually, you can't have them come into play with their other side face up ever. The old school cards will always come in with the day side on the front. So maybe they won't be updating them. It's possible they could go either way with it to create less confusion. I'm not 100% sure, but Mayor Avabruck is one of my favorite werewolves from the original Innistrad. He is 1 green and 1 for a 1/1 human advisor werewolf. He gives your other humans +1/+1. And at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Mayor of Avabruck. All right? He can deny his true nature for only so long. Actually, you know what? That makes me want to back up for a second and double check something here. So if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day next turn. So this triggers during the upkeep. Maybe the night to day transformation happens earlier than the upkeep. That will remain to be seen because we don't have all the details. So there could be somewhat slight functional differences between these and the daybound, nightbound cards. So, at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, he flips over. He can deny his true nature for only so long. And you take a look at the artwork. I love this artwork. I love the kind of dark purple nature of it. You've got this mayor who's poring over plans, you know what I mean? Nighttime is falling. He's maybe looking over the map of the village, figuring out what he's going to do to make life better for the villagers. But the flavor text says he can deny his true nature for only so long. For when the moon comes out, he transforms into his werewolf version. And we get to see that as the Howl Pack Alpha. And if it's not obvious, take a look at the window he's standing in front of right there. See the design of it? The lattice that's in the glass? Now look at him. He's leaping out through the window. What do you think the reconstruction costs are for this mayor? You know what I mean? It's like, we gotta get a new mayor. This mayor keeps leaping out these clearly expensive windows. This isn't some peasant class window he's smashing up. So this is the Howl Pack Alpha right here, and you can see up at the top, this is what the nightbound symbol is going to look like. A little crescent moon. There may be a tiny bit of a tweak compared to the old version, but that's what it's going to look like. And you can see that this is the werewolf version of the mayor. He gives other werewolf and wolf creatures you control +1/+1. At the beginning of your end step, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. And then at the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Howl Pack Alpha. So you can see that the day-night cycle that was originally created for the werewolves on Innistrad has been maybe slightly tweaked based on when it triggers. So whether it's at the absolute beginning of the turn or at the upkeep, I mean, it could still be at the upkeep because who knows 100%. The upkeep is traditionally the only time you can do something at the beginning of your turn. At the beginning of the turn, usually you don't have the ability to do anything whatsoever. So it does remain to be seen exactly when these effects will take place. And honestly, I don't expect it to make much of a difference. I think it would be pretty easy to errata all of the cards like this into daybound, nightbound versions and simply say that any card that has the sun and the moon symbol on it are automatically errated to daybound, nightbound, right? It's a lot simpler than having to individually track each of your cards and figure it out for them. Although across the werewolves, they all function the same. So you're all going to have them flipping at the same time roughly anyway. So it really does remain to be seen whether they're going to tidy it up. I, for one, like the idea of just making it a universal sort of thing. It makes it feel like it's easier to track overall rather than paying attention to individual cards and remembering, okay, I got to flip this guy. Oh, I've got to flip this guy. When it's a day-night, it's literally, okay, any daybound or nightbound cards flip, and then the fact that nightbound, the biggest difference between this and the new mechanic is that nightbound is the face-up variation that cards will come in as when it's nighttime. So this card can never come into play as the Howl Pack Alpha using these rules. But if this was considered nightbound and it was nighttime, you could go, boom, I'm putting it out. It's coming out as the Werewolf Lord. And it does actually change the functionality. And it does give wizards a little more of an ability so that you could have nightbound cards that say, when this card comes into play, do this trigger. Because you can't do that with this variation of the werewolves. If you were to try and have them with a come into play trigger, it wouldn't matter because by the time it transformed, it's already come into play. So it does give them more design space to work with, and it makes for cleaner concepts for, let's say they're going to do a sorcery that makes it day. You can just go, it becomes day. You know what I mean? You don't have to have all of this like, all werewolves transform or all werewolves transform back or anything like that. You can literally just have, it becomes daytime, it becomes nighttime. And that feels like a cleaner way to execute the mechanic. So for me, I give this a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Big thank you to all my patrons for supporting my channel. And if you like what's going on here, then like the video so YouTube knows. I will see you all, my friends, next time. Thanks for being here.